Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
There's a new mayor in town. It's been over 2 weeks since Nederland voters cast their ballots for mayor. It turns out the locals have a taste for drama. Several rounds of unofficial counts and recounts had candidates Billy Giblin and Nichole Sterling trading spots on the leaderboard. Final results came in Monday, April 20th, with Sterling edging out Giblin by 3 votes, 261 to 258. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman. Today, Mayor Nichole Sterling joins the show for an exclusive interview to tell us what the last few weeks have been like and the big ideas she has for Ned. To save time for that, we're going to keep the top of today's show short and sweet. Now, here are this week's top headlines. The discovery of a case of possible homemade explosives near Ponderosa Way, just off Coal Creek Canyon Drive, triggered a shelter-in-place order for area residents on Sunday, April 19th. The Boulder County Sheriff's Office received the call around 8 a.m. and shut down the road for 11 hours while bomb technicians assessed and managed the scene. After the Boulder County Regional Bomb Squad successfully contained the devices and transported them away, the shelter-in-place order was lifted at 7 p.m. Technicians later identified the devices as having components typically used to build pipe bombs, but determined they did not contain any explosive material, and so they were unable to be detonated. Ribbon cutting for Idaho Springs' $71 million cable car system has been delayed until May, according to the Clear Creek Current. The mighty Argo cable car, a gondola ride that will take visitors from the town's historic Argo Gold Mill up to a mountain plaza on top of Virginia Canyon, was scheduled to open Friday, April 24th. Late in the day on Monday, April 20th, Argo representatives announced the ceremony would be pushed back until May due to weather conditions. Tickets are still available on the cable car's website for rides as early as May 9th, with standard rates starting at $50 a person. We'll drop a link to purchase tickets in the show notes. And those are this week's top headlines. Pick up a copy of The Mountaineer or head to the mtnear.com to read these stories and so much more. Now, we're going to jump into my conversation with Mayor Nichole Sterling. The former Mayor Pro Tem was sworn in at Nederland's Tuesday, April 21st Board of Trustees meeting and hasn't missed a beat. Let's dive in. All right, I'd like to welcome Nichole Sterling, the new mayor of Nederland, onto the show this morning. Welcome, Nichole.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So last night was the swearing-in ceremony. How did that go?
Oh, it was lovely. I think it's always special when, especially we have new board members who are joining us, but it was especially poignant for me just because, I got a little choked up on that last line delivering it because it is special. And I do want this office, the mayor's office, to mean something again to folks. And so I take that responsibility very seriously.
That's great to hear. I wanted to just ask you how you're feeling after the insanity that was the last 2 weeks of not really knowing who the mayor was going to be. We had a razor-thin vote count. It went back and forth, and we finally got results. So what have the last 2 weeks been like for you?
Well, and I'll even extend that to really the last 3 weeks and, month because even leading up to the actual election was a very exhausting process for me. I have to show up and, be strong for those folks around me. But it was really hard going through some of this process of having our signs stolen and, just some of the things that we had to combat. And so it was just like, oh my goodness, this is intense. And then when the election came out and it was off by a vote of 1, like I went into it just assuming that I was going to lose, quite honestly. After the posts on Facebook, and also you're going up against an incumbent who has backing because he's had relationships with, like Joe Neguse and some of the Boulder County commissioners. So on all accounts, I was expecting to lose, but the up and down of the last couple of weeks has definitely been like, okay, well, this is just how Nederland does things. I shouldn't be surprised too much. and now here we are. And I'm really excited for this next chapter for Nederland.
You weren't coming in as an outsider here. You were serving on the board already as Mayor Pro Tem. Were there any particular issues that compelled you to want to take the next step and throw your hat in the ring for mayor?
I think where I was most concerned about was just the process of how we govern and making sure that we tightened that up. There's always so many things that we need to tackle in any given year. And it's so often that a local government's like, yes, everything is important, and then nothing gets done. And that's where I had such a hands-on approach with the strategic planning that happened a couple of years ago. I was not okay with what we had come up with. I was like, this isn't going to hold us accountable to anything. And I wanted to pull that forward into this next chapter because of the criticality of Eldora, getting Big Springs egress done. Many people know I live up in Big Springs. And so this is an issue for me and my family. As well as getting the Caribou shopping center. So where, Billy and I were aligned in a lot of those things, I think the difference is how, and the discipline and the deliberateness of how we get those things done is what really separated us.
Yeah, and I did want to kind of dig into that a little bit. We did have a razor thin voter margin and a pretty decent voting turnout for a mayoral election. I think it was a little bit less than 40%, which says a lot for a local election. Yeah. As you're kind of stepping into this role, do you have an approach that you're going to take, considering the community was pretty split between the two of you?
Yeah, I think when you do look at one of the biggest issues that maybe wasn't as high of a priority for me, but it was for Billy, was the sustainability piece. And it's not to say that I'm like not in on sustainability. It's just when you have folks who for 30 years have been asking for sidewalks and or walkable infrastructure and affordable housing, we're about ready to go into strategic planning. And what I want from a discipline standpoint for the board is for us, let's take it all in. Instead of doing these like one-off goals here and there throughout the year, no. Let's bring it all together. Let's decide of what's of high importance. And if something doesn't make those strategic goals, that's fine. Is there another way to solve it other than through an ordinance or through staff time or through board time, like our planning commission's time? And so I want us to get a little bit more creative about that. And so like folks who really leaned into Mayor Billy because of, the sustainability issue, it's not going away. We just need to find the right way to integrate it. Maybe that's through a microgrid system, which is something that I've been like super, super interested about to bring to our community. And so there's more conversation to have about that. In terms of like approach, I mean, Billy was a likable guy. And I mean, I love him for that reason. Our kids are friends, right? This is a small community. You can't get away from each other. And so, Billy has those strengths in terms of being that likable person. And oftentimes women have a likability issue, right? It's like either we're competent, but we're less likable, or we're really likable, but then we're considered less competent. And I think that more folks just probably need to talk to me and see that I'm both able to get the things over the line. And sometimes that does mean not making everyone happy. And I'm okay with that. But the process and how we do that is also important to make sure folks feel heard, and that we're doing the right thing for Nederland. Because just because we have an idea or something that we want to push up doesn't always mean that it's the right thing for Nederland. But hopefully through some conversations and through some of these ideas that I have of bringing community discussions together, I think we can get where we need to go. So I'm excited by that.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about a couple of the things that you campaigned on. You really positioned yourself as someone who is ready to innovate in a small town. And now you have the opportunity to put that innovation into action here. Where do you think the town could most afford to innovate right now? What's like the major issues that you can tackle through this innovative approach?
Yeah, for me, the innovation isn't always so much on a particular issue or even a technology, because I know that's where folks would point to first about me. It's like, oh, it must be something to do with AI. And it's not necessarily. I really want to look at the connective tissue and the communication that we have among us as residents. I think that's one of the first steps from an innovative standpoint that I want to tackle. How do we communicate about what's happening in local government? How do we get more people involved? How do they stay up to speed on the things that are important to them? Because we find that oftentimes, like, folks will come out in droves for a child care facility conversation, but could care less maybe about the comprehensive plan or, strategic goals that the Board of Trustees is putting together. And so it's like, I really want to find those ways to meet folks where they are. And some of these innovative practices of like world cafes, this is a very deliberate process where folks are brought together for communication and for conversation, because I really do think that drive a lot of the strategy within local government. Those are some of the connective tissue that pulls us together. Those are some of the things that I'm looking to be the most innovative with. And then, yes, there's always opportunity for, technology in the right places. I'm actually not a person for technology's sake. It has to be deliberate. It has to be the right fit, whether that's microgrid system or even wildfire resiliency. As I had mentioned in one of my campaign videos, Boulder County has been using for the last couple of years these microsensors to detect the very smallest particulate matter of a wildfire and be able to distinguish a wildfire from like other fire. And in our community where we're so worried about that, to be able to have that early detection system is hugely important. And so in my mind, innovation and technology like that, when it has the potential to save lives, that's the kind of things I like for us to really look into.
Yeah, absolutely. Another area that I thought was interesting that kind of goes hand in hand with innovation, but is maybe separate from the technology, is through, creative solutions to affordable housing. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your ideas and goals for affordable housing in Nederland.
This is something I'm passionate about. When I first ran to be appointed to the board, affordable housing was such a big issue for me. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I started my young life as a very young mother. I gave birth to my first son. He's 26 now, when I was 19. And so like being able to access resources at such a young age it's very difficult. And also being a parent. And so that has always stuck with me, and it has really been a foundation for my public service. Is I want to help the folks who may have been in my shoes at one point or another. And so from an affordable housing standpoint, I get to talk to a lot of different folks across the United States, ideas that they're trialing. And some of the best ideas I've heard are from ones that are in like very resource constrained areas, like actually big cities. And if you think about it, we have a similar constraint. We can't necessarily go out, and our residents don't want us to go out there. We don't want to just annex for urban sprawl, for sprawl reasons. And so, yeah, some of the innovation around that are things like when it comes to the PIF fees, either pushing those out, like if you're going to build a backyard cottage and or what we typically would call like an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, those PIF fees are those plant investment fees. And here they're expensive. They're not right sized to the size of an ADU or a backyard cottage. And we expect those to be paid up front. And what I would suggest is that we push those to the end so that if you are going to rent it out, you only start paying those when you actually start bringing in rental income. And or if you're dedicated to making that an affordable housing unit, we go ahead and we waive those. Right. But the other one that I'm actually like really, really excited about, if we're, like I said, we're going into strategic planning, and hopefully out of that strategic planning, we're directing the Planning Commission to work on affordable housing, is this idea of being able to subdivide your plot. To subdivide your plot means that you would then be able to create 2 plots, and you can either sell that off, that second plot off, and get some income from that, because we know that living in the mountains is very expensive. And or once you subdivide that plot, you then be able to access traditional housing financing in order to build, like a, actual housing construction loan or whatnot. Instead of what has to happen today, if I want to build an ADU, I've got to pull out a home equity line of credit. And not everyone may be set up for that, but it's much easier to get that financing if you subdivide that plot. So like those are just some of the things where I see those as low-hanging fruit in order to generate income for our residents and get affordable housing built and be serious about it. What I love about backyard cottages is it's a very gentle infill strategy rather than the huge apartment complex that everyone is just so anxious about and doesn't want to see. And I just see this as a wonderful way to have your parents age in place if you want them to, or, provide affordable housing for workers in our community.
Yeah, certainly a creative solution. I wanted to switch gears here. I know that there are a few open seats on the board right now. And given that both you and Billy were serving on the board before, you as Mayor Pro Tem, Billy as mayor, do you have any plans to nominate or appoint Billy to the board? Is that on your radar at the moment?
So we can't necessarily just nominate someone else. The person themselves has to petition and submit for an appointment. And so that's completely up to Billy if he wants to do that. And yes, he would have my support. This election has, I think, started to invigorate a lot of other folks that we haven't heard from in the past. And so, we hope that it'll attract new, fresh ideas, new faces who are like, okay, Nederland is doing some interesting things. It's kind of punching up against its weight. I want to be a part of that. And some of the things that we hear the most as reasons why not to is time. And, you have to be willing that it'll take up about 5 hours of your week. Some weeks it's nothing, right? But you do have to anticipate that it will be a time commitment up to 5 hours. It's sometimes it's very daunting it's a 4-year term, although my term would be 2 years. So my open seat is only 2 years. What I don't want is for these things to kind of be barriers for people to put their name in the hat, because we are at a critical time and we need anyone who is interested and loves to solve hard problems, because that's what we've got.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ned has a lot of exciting and really big things coming down the road between Eldora and, as you said, affordable housing. So I hope that you guys get some good candidates that are willing to step up to the plate. So my final question here, as you're stepping in, what do the next 6 months look like for you?
The first 6 months, so the first thing is strategic planning. I've, incredibly thankful our town manager, John Kane, is right there with me in terms of mindset. And he is just as excited of this next chapter. And these next 2 years, like I said, are so critical. So strategic planning is a huge thing. We'll start having our first conversations around that in May and hopefully get that wrapped up in June. And then we need to, this has been a kind of a chronic and lagging issue, is our existing advisory boards. And do we have the right setup of the advisory boards to help us meet those goals? And if we don't, then I want to have that conversation. I'm not into doing government for government's sakes and just because it's been that way for, hundred of years or so. Like, I want us to rip off the Band-Aid and ask the hard questions, like, is this the right setup for what we need? Some of the conversations that we've already had with Town Manager Kane is, post-acquisition, who are the right folks and what are the right roles that we need in order to execute on our goals? So it's really going to be a lot of the strategic planning, making sure we've got the right setup, but then knocking down these other things that are critical, which is the Big Springs egress and the Caribou Shopping Center. It's, like I said, I live up here. It's a safety issue. We've had a very dry winter. Our evacuation plan is to swim across the reservoir. That is ridiculous. And I'm willing to fight the fight that's necessary in order to get this egress built. And whether, that's with different jurisdictions and or property owners, it's just, I'm not willing to put people's lives on the line. I'm just not, especially because it's my own family up here. And we need to get that Caribou Shopping Center rebuilt. But it's also having conversations about our First Street corridor. We have buildings that are falling down. We got to do something about that. It's not okay that our restaurants have leaking roofs every time that it rains, right? And so I really want to start to jumpstart those conversations and get us some proper buildings in our First Street corridor.
Sounds like it's going to be a busy 6 months for you.
It is going to be a busy 6 months, but we're laying down the infrastructure, if you will, to make us successful over the next 2 years.
Do you have any final message for your new-ish constituents?
Yeah, actually. So maybe you will find yourself in a situation where, I want to take a go at being a board member. And I would say, please reach out and, ask the questions. And this is not something, these next couple of years is where anyone can just kind of sit on the sidelines. We're going to need all hands on deck. And there are going to be opportunities, especially once strategic planning is done and we have identified the right structure, there are going to be a lot of opportunities for our residents to participate. And I want to signal to folks now, be ready, be ready to step in, be ready. Not everyone gets their way in local government. I mean, that's actually how the Constitution was built. Not everyone got their way. And yet we were able to move forward with something that worked. Right. And so I want that to be the message here is we need folks to help shape what this future looks like, come into the process willing to help, knowing that you're not going to get everything that you want but, can we move forward together? And that's what I would just leave folks with. So.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us today, Nichole. I wish you the best of luck. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's all for today's show. Thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in today. You heard Nichole. You too can get involved. Attend board meetings, volunteer for the town, do what you can with your time. If you liked today's episode and you want to hear more conversations with your local officials, please like or subscribe to the show to hear our episodes the moment they are out. You can go the extra mile and share it around. It is a huge help to the show when you send it to friends, family, whoever, and it really helps us grow. One last thing. We've partnered with a nonprofit called Aftersight to bring you audio versions of all of the Mountaineers articles. Aftersight is a Colorado-based organization that delivers news and information to readers who are blind, low vision, or have barriers to reading. We've been working our way up to this, and we're so excited to finally share it with you. The articles are incredibly well read, and the readers' voices are pretty soothing, much more so than mine. Check it out, or send it to someone who you think would benefit from it. Once again, this is the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman, and thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak-to-Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.